1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in OWS fam. So glad you are with us. We're back in the lab, the DFS lab, presented by 1 week season. As always, purpose of the show, build a lineup on DraftKings. Use that as a vehicle to talk through the upcoming slate, upcoming week 5. You'll be watching this on Thursday, October 3rd. We're recording this, though, on Wednesday night, late night edition. I'm your host, Cheeseman, and I'm joined now by StatATL. Stat, how's it going? How was week 4 for you?
Cheese. Happy hump day, my friend.
It's
going good, man. I always look forward to doing these shows with you. I feel like I've got fresh thoughts on the slate. I always do those Tuesday first look stuff yesterday. So I don't know. I feel like I've got a nice fresh perspective on this week's slate. And so always excited to hop in and build a lineup with you. How's the week going for you, buddy?
That's right. No, yeah, same for me. I mean, it's I'm excited for this week. I'm excited for the Packers Rams. It looks pretty exciting. Just a couple of offenses that really could be up and coming for Jordan Love. But yeah, man, week 4, it's good to get it kind of in the rearview mirror. Kyler Murray, I had a lot of him, and that was just a pretty epic failure on his part. I mean, I didn't even think that he was capable of getting below 10 fantasy points. That's got to be in the bottom 10% of percentile outcomes for him. And just, it was tough, but again, moving forward, it's looking good. I'm just going to jump in real fast and pull up our build from last week. You do your lineup review show. You did it on Tuesday. I watched it. It was good to watch and just kind of reflect. It helps to put week 4 in the rearview mirror, kind of look back at some of the plays. And so given that, I don't know if you may have reviewed a lineup similar to this on your show, but if you didn't, what are your thoughts on this lineup?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I'm a pick a lane, go 100 miles an hour type deal. And so,
Absolutely.
I typically do 100 to 150 lineups, and I keep a really tight pool, generally around 40 to 45, like max for the whole pool. So, I generally try to kind of pick my core, and my core this week was Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison. Had them at about 50% exposure. And then, kind of mixed and matched. I was kind of all in on that game and had a bunch of Brian Robinson, a bunch of Terry McLaurin, and so the week was okay. I was about a 50% return, so not great. My $50 single entries I play in 2 different, the bigger one and then the secondary contest.
Yeah.
I think the cash line was like 151. And my 2 different rosters, but one scored 150 and one scored 148. So I was right there on, if one of them had cashed, it probably would have been I'm not playing thousands of dollars a week. So, it was fine. It was good. It was a good week. We I had a lot of lineups that kind of finished between 140 and 155.
Same
points.
here.
Little different break here or there, and it could have been significantly better. But again, we aren't playing for the cash line. But sometimes you're just hoping to get a couple rosters over the cash line, help secure some additional buy-ins for next week.
That's right, man. When you know that you're not going for, when you get that confirmation that first place isn't happening that week, then you're just hoping hey, can I just get a couple more across the finish line here into cash territory and yeah, just kind of even things up and really get ready for next week. I was fortunate to hit a 5 leg on underdog with the using picks from the OWS props package. Check that out if you haven't, but that basically put me at break even for the week, because with Kyler, heavy on Kyler, and every Nico Collins was obviously the key piece, and every Nico Collins lineup had Kyler Murray in it. I had some Jayden Daniels and Brian Robinson that did fine, but that ended up for some reason not having Nico Collins. So, hey man, in this lineup, again, it obviously didn't cash this week, but it still had a lot of the core elements that we look for with that correlation. I mean, Darnell Mooney, he had a couple of deep balls, late in that game when Atlanta was trying to come back that, if he had caught one of those, could have been a completely different story. Taysom Hill, obviously a great great play there at the tight end position, had a couple of touchdowns, and just the way he is used for New Orleans, he seems like if tight end is looking thin, I think Taysom Hill is always going to be a good option just because he might get a couple of touchdowns inside the 5, and you'll take that all day. So yeah, man. But we move on. And we move on to next week.
What did
right?
I say with the little tattoo? No regrets.
Yes.
I feel like we had some strong pieces on this roster. I mean, you mentioned Taysom Hill got goal line opportunity, scored 2 touchdowns. Brian Robinson gave you 20 to 25 points. Kyren Williams kind of the same. And I wouldn't have changed what we did with Najee Harris and the Steelers D.
Yeah.
I was expecting him to touch the ball 20 times. I didn't realize that Steelers weren't going to be able to get the ground game going. And obviously, Kyler and Marvin Harrison kind of failed, which was so not what I was expecting. I don't know if you watched that game, but first drive, they come down the field, touchdown to Marvin Harrison in the first 5 minutes of the game. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be good for my lineups.
Yes.
Nope, they don't do anything else the rest of the game.
Yeah, that is that's almost worse than just, I don't know, some other sort of failure when they start really hot and they have we all love the fire next to their names on the mobile app. It's like they're on fire early and you can already just, see the green at the end of the tunnel. But then, yeah, I mean, I didn't watch the game live, but I went back and watched just the shortened version on NFL Plus. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they just didn't seem like there was much of a sense of urgency in terms of their offensive play calling. Not a lot of shots taken downfield, a lot of just real horizontal stuff, kind of similar to how it was when Kingsbury was there. Obviously, Marvin Harrison certainly was not like a comer who was forcing the ball to Marvin Harrison or trying hard to get him involved. So, and apparently, they were like their rush rate was, I forget the exact term, but rushing more than expected, especially considering that they were down in that game. So I'm not sure what they were doing in terms of play calling. Maybe they'll be more aggressive this weekend. But all that to say, make sure to check out Stats lineup review show. It'll be linked up there in the top right hand corner, and you do a great job with that, Stat. So let's
we typically get 50 roster submissions a week.
Yeah.
So it seems like the OWS subscribers are liking it. So hopefully it continues to be a helpful tool for everyone.
Yeah, I try to watch it typically when I'm driving or something like that, and it's good. So check it out. Let's talk week 5 here, a kind of overall high level look. I'll just give you a game real quick that I like, and then you can give me some spots that you like as we get into the lineup building. But this is not going to be sneaky, but I really like San Francisco. Obviously, their team total is pretty lofty, and so there's going to be plenty of people who will be looking at San Francisco as a way to get some exposure and get some potential upside. But I really do like Brock Purdy, potentially stacking him with 1 or 2 of his passes. Well, really, since given that he's not a rushing quarterback, probably with 2. And you got to remember that without CMC, Deebo Samuel, he has had some monster games in the past, even with CMC. I mean, looking at my numbers here, last season, Deebo, he had games of 39 and 37 fantasy points. And I forget whether CMC played in those games. And then against the Cardinals last year, the Niners put up in the first matchup 35 and then 45 in the second one. And in both those games, CMC played and had smash games like 35 plus fantasy points. So I just threw a lot of numbers there, but I really like Deebo Samuel and then maybe another pass catcher as well, maybe Jennings. You could pair it with Mason too, even though he's not super involved. And then I actually don't mind. This is a little more risky, but bringing it back with Marvin Harrison, I think it's going to be a very tough matchup for Arizona, but I think he's going to be really low owned after what happened this past weekend. And if Arizona, realizes, hey, we're going to have to put up points in order to keep up with San Francisco here, maybe they throw more and maybe Trey McBride is back. That helps Marvin Harrison. So that's a spot that I do like. And we'll definitely be looking at trying to get some exposure to that. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I like that shout. I think this is a really interesting spot for Marvin Harrison coming. I mean, he wasn't super chalk, but he did carry some higher ownership last week. And, So like the two, what I'll call competent offenses that have faced the 49ers, which were like the Jets and the Vikings, they both had some strong wide receiver showings. I think Alan Lazard went for like 6 for 90 and 2 touchdowns. And then Justin Jefferson went for over 100, I think 133 and a touchdown. And then so, the offenses that the Niners did shut down, were the Rams without Kupp and Nakua. And then they shut down the Patriots, who don't exactly have any wide receivers that, make anybody, scared either. So I think it's an interesting spot for Marvin Harrison here. I think after last week, his price stayed around, I think 7,500 or so. And it's just like, there are pay up options that I think people are going to gravitate towards a lot more than him. So he's a guy that, if you're going to build around the 49ers, I really do like him as a bringback. It'll probably be 1% owned. And I just think he's got some great upside there. And so that's a game that I like as well. I do a first look on Tuesday, and I think the games that kind of stood out to me, I really liked the Ravens and the Bengals. I thought probably another game that's not going to fly under the radar, but, a good one to me. And then I also really like the Packers and the Rams. Those are probably my 3 favorites. Again, if you haven't looked at the slate yet, for those looking, it's only a 10-game main slate this week.
Right.
There's 2 games that I think are just probably complete cross-offs for me that, maybe that'll change or evolve as the week goes on, but probably don't have a ton of interest in as of now. And, we'll just kind of see how those thoughts shake out.
You're stacking up Tyler Huntley, are you? That's your sneaky one? No, just kidding. Miami Dolphins.
I don't mind Tyler Huntley. I think when I won the $50 single entry, which was like a 50K score, Tyler Huntley was my quarterback that week.
That was against Green Bay back in the day, wasn't it? Like 20.
It was against Green Bay, yeah. Tyler Huntley and Mark Andrews. Yeah. They both went for like 35 points.
I remember that. I do. I remember actually I had some Tyler Huntley, but I didn't go heavy. I think he was really low owned for me. Man, I just mid curved it, man. I got to go all in on that. Okay,
it's always frustrating to talk back about those weeks because the 2 weeks that I've won those bigger single entry contests, if I had played that lineup in the Millie, both weeks it would have won. But I don't play the Millie, so like I can't look at it and be like, oh, I would have won the Millie. Like I never enter it. So.
I know. Those are, I mean, and those that's always going to happen because people are going to say, hey, look at the lineup, your lineup score. If you had been an X, Y, or Z contest, and I mean, that's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's not hindsight, but it's always tough to look at that. I totally agree. I had a showdown win once where it was a smaller contest for like a 1K win. And if it would have been in the Millie, it would have been more. Would have been bigger. Okay, so let's jump into kind of what our kind of normal our normal flavor here. And
I love the single entry 3 max, kind of that 5 to 10,000 entrant contest. That's generally my sweet spot. I know you host these shows with a couple other different contributors, and I know on tomorrow's show with Pappy, like you guys will probably build a Millie Maker lineup. That's not my specialty. I always like to focus on the single entry, the 3 max, and it's kind of one of those spots where if you're playing in a bigger field contest, you kind of have to be you generally want to be a little less correlated. You got to take a little bit more shots. It's just not where I have excelled in the past. So I'm going to kind of stay in my lane here. And let's keep going with these, couple thousand entrant contests.
Yeah, absolutely love it. Now, I actually have a quick question. So here's the question. How do you settle? Because you say you build, 150 lineups, you max some different contests, but you really like to focus on kind of your main build or two for single entry. How do you get to your single entry build? Like, how do you settle on a lineup or two that you just say, I love this, I'm putting it in single entry?
So I do a bunch of practice rosters kind of throughout the week, starting on Tuesday, going up until Saturday night. And, I do them on my phone. and I just kind of, save them into the camera roll. And as I build them throughout the week, like I end up hearting or favoriting, on an iPhone, it's just a heart of like, this is a roster I really like. And so as the week evolves, that'll come to 5 or 10 different lineups. And a lot of times I will enter those 5 or 10 lineups into different single entries. Because for me, I'll play the 3, the 5, the 12, the 27, the 50, the 100. Like, it just depends on the week, but I'll play the main and the secondary ones that they have. And that's, I don't look at it and say, oh, I think this roster is better for, what is this contest? 2,300 versus the main $50, which is like 5,600 or something. Like, to me, they're both mid-size fields, and I'm happy to enter either into those. I'm not playing in the 50,000, 100,000 entrant contest generally.
Got it. I like that. Quick look at the contest details: 10K to first, 2x on the minimum cash. So, all right, Stat. You mentioned the games that you like. What?
I said this is a great structure. 10% to first, 1% to 10th place, and 2x minimum. Like, these are the type of contests, and one of the things we put out is like kind of a contest selection every week. Always try to be looking for the least top heavy contests that DraftKings offers. Everybody wants to chase the $1 million, but if you look at this week's $1 million, it's like 30 or 40%, I think, to first place, or maybe that's the 555 milli or something. It's just such a horrible payout structure. It's just, if you're trying to stay a DFS player for a while, there's nothing wrong with winning $10,000. It's fun to try to chase $1 million, but there's nothing wrong with the flatter payout structures and winning a little bit more consistently.
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be mad about a 10K win. I could completely agree there. Okay, Stat, who do you like? How do you want to start this build? You mentioned some games that you like. How do you want to start this one? And by the way, if you guys didn't catch the episode yet with Hilo on Tuesday, he built a lineup that was led out by a Joe Flacco double stack. So if you want to check that out, top right corner, check it out. But Stat, where do you want to go with this one?
Well, that's a game I like. If Joe Flacco starts, I think that's a really interesting game. I don't know that will be sneaky, but again, it's a 10-game slate, so you don't have to be sneaky. There are some clear kind of best on paper environments, and I think that we're gonna build with one of those in mind. AR limited to practice. Okay, so let's kind of go ahead. I was gonna say, let's start with the Packers, man. I love the Packers this week. So let's start with Jordan Love. And, one of the great things about the Packers is they're not super, I don't know that I would call it a great thing, but they're not super concentrated. There's 5 or 6 guys that are involved. If you want to include Josh Jacobs, who catches passes too, there's probably 4 to 5 guys that legit could be the right answer. So, it's interesting. You were kind of talking about your single entry builds and how I land there. A lot of times, like, I'll build a roster, and let's say that we really love like this Jordan Love double stack, and with the receivers in general for the Packers kind of being pretty close in price, like I may go reserve, the $3.20 max or the $1.20 max, and basically throw 20 different iterations of like this lineup that we build in that contest. And let's say for this roster, we're going to do Jayden Reed and Tucker Kraft. On those, I may kind of say, okay, I do like Tucker Kraft, but let me build one, with Ontavian Wicks. So let me build one with Dobbs, and kind of keep the rest of the core pretty similar, but just kind of say, okay, if I nail this bet with Jordan Love and this is the right game, let's mix and match a couple of the combos on that. So that's kind of a strategy that I like to take, is kind of settling on what my favorite one is. But as DFS players know, it generally is much easier to kind of identify the more likely good game environment. And it's obviously harder to pin down, where exactly it's going to flow, especially on a team where it's a little bit more spread out. So 100%. I hate to nail everything and then, just have the wrong wide receiver. So I'll mix and match them a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. And like you said, you got a couple different options here with this Green Bay offense.
Yeah, so on this build, let's go Jayden Reed. I think I think that Dontavian Wicks is probably going to be the most popular Packer just because of the price discount that you get. Had a really strong game last week after Christian Watson left. I think he went for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns, 78 and 2 touchdowns. So yeah, I think he's going to be a popular option at 5K, guy who's likely going to be on the field most of the snaps, running in 2 wide receiver sets would be my guess. So I think he'll be popular, and I think Jayden Reed and Romeo Doubs will be a little less popular. So we could go both of them, but let's kind of tie in our tight end here, and let's go Tucker Kraft here at tight end. With Jordan Love not really having a ton of rushing upside, again, I always like to kind of double stack. You're more of your pocket passer. This is a way at 16.5 to kind of lock in, a decent chunk of that offense. And we're just going to kind of bank on the touchdowns flowing through the air from Jordan Love. If we enter something like this in a 20 max, I'll probably would do some builds where I go Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs and Reed, or Jacobs and Kraft. You know what I mean? I would mix and match kind of those pieces.
Absolutely. Yes. So I'm guessing you want to bring it back with a Rams piece, and obviously there's an obvious one that's going to get a ton of usage for them. There's some other tertiary pieces, but do you want to talk about a Rams bring back yet, or do you want to go somewhere else?
Yeah. So, for those of you who listen to the roster review show, who have listened to these pods before, a bring back not required. I'm just generally a big proponent of correlation. It's just less things that you have to get right. If you were in the Discord today, you kind of saw Mike M. Johnson and I going back and forth with a couple different subscribers. We were looking at this week's Millie roster and basically saying like, oh, okay, well, he played him and him and him. And I was just kind of saying, okay, well, he made these bets on Justin Fields and Pickens. And, kind of looking at how the Steelers have played in the past, like they've been generally very conservative because they're happy to run the ball. So if they get out of that and Justin Fields is throwing the ball more and he's running, it's probably because they're either being pushed or trailing. So if they're being pushed or trailing, it's likely that a Colt is doing something tournament worthy. So I was just looking at the roster and said, hey, it wouldn't have hurt you to roster Josh Downs here. It wouldn't have hurt you to play Michael Pittman here instead of, I think the winning roster had like Mike Evans completely uncorrelated. And Mike Evans did fine. I think he scored like 20 to 25 points, but so did Michael Pittman and so did Josh Downs. And it's just, again, it doesn't have to be correlated. It's just one less thing that you have to get right because, if Fields is putting up a huge game, a Colt probably is doing something decently strong too. And if you're playing in a bigger field, it doesn't have to be 100,000 entrants. If you're playing in a 5,000 entrant contest, like someone's going to have that right Colt. So roll the dice and let it be you. And it's just kind of one thing that you have to get, one less thing. So
yeah. No, yeah. And
go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Yeah. I love that it was in the inner circle chat, and that's a part of the, OWS, kind of their top tier membership. And I love it because you got a bunch of sharp guys in there. Obviously, not everyone thinks the exact same way, but really it almost makes you better as you talk through these ideas and kind of, compare perspectives. Just one of the valuable aspects of that inner circle tier is that you got yourself, Mike, Hilo, Zandomir, all the OWS contributors. They aren't just writing articles and then disappearing. You guys are in there mixing it up, and that is very valuable. So I love that. I love that discourse.
Yeah, it's great, and it's super active. And I think JMs like to say it's iron sharpening iron because there's a lot of really sharp players in there that, just standard contributors that just are very successful players. So it's one of the best benefits of being an inner circle member for sure.
It is. So,
all right, so here I think there's two to me, there's two kind of viable ways to go here. You either run it back with Kyren Williams, which I think will be the most popular way to kind of bring this back, or you go with Jordan Whittington, who kind of saw the role that we thought we would see in week 3 out of him. We saw it in week 4. But I think for this build, I mean, we can always pivot down to Whittington. Let's go with Kyren Williams and kind of see where that shakes us out on the build.
Love it. Love it. All right. Yep. So we got our core game stack here. Mm-hmm. So where do you want to go next?
So typically after I get my core of where I want to start, I either will go with another kind of mini correlation, or I'll throw in kind of what I generally like to think of as like a placeholder D. I think we do this every week. And for me, it's always kind of that mid-tier D. When I go through, I identify 1 or 2 higher price guys, 1 or 2 kind of medium, that 33 to like 2,800 range, and then 1 or 2 cheapies. And I always kind of like to throw in a D around like 3,000. That way I give myself the ability to go up or down, or even just stay with where we're at. So I think that the Ds that I identified in the mid range that I really liked, let's go with the Broncos here. I think the Broncos are a super sharp play here. And, you know, Devontae Adams already ruled out for Sunday's game. So really limits, Vegas even more. They've shown basically no ability to run the ball. So, and that's really what I think that's a common misconception when people are picking a defense. They're like, oh, this is going to be a low scoring game. Like that's what I want. That's not what you want. You know, where you score points on defense is through turnovers, through sacks, through interceptions, through defensive or special teams touchdowns. So generally, you really want teams that you think are going to be throwing the ball more, because that gives you more opportunity for sacks, more opportunities for interceptions. Yeah. And so I really like the Broncos here. And let's even double down on this. And I think when I was thinking through this earlier today, I think that what I said is I think this is going to make me throw up in my mouth a little bit. But let's go with Javonte Williams, a guy that I never play, but he saw 19 opportunities last week. And I think it's just I like it. I think this is I think he's got 20-point upside, and he's basically 5K. I like this. We're doubling down on the Broncos, kind of saying, hey, maybe they get a defensive score and then they just keep pounding the rock. And so I like this, and this gives us about 6K with three positions to go. So we've got a lot of flexibility here.
Oh yeah, the correlation and also getting a pay down running back. You got to find somewhere to find that value this week, and I think that's a good spot to go. So that gives us a couple receiver spots plus the flex, about 6K average left.
Nice. Okay, so one of the games that we highlighted earlier, I think you even mentioned, I think Hilo built around it. Let's get a mini correlation here between the Colts and the Jags. And so I think if we're looking at wide receivers for the Colts, it's either Pittman or Josh Downs. I love what Josh Downs brings to the table. A little bit more of that home run threat, where Pittman is kind of more of, the receptions. And I'd rather take a shot on the cheaper guy anyway. So 5,100, let's go with Josh Downs. And then I think for the Jags, you kind of have three options as kind of the most viable bringbacks between Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, or if he comes back, Evan Engram, I think is another solid option. Obviously, we already have Tucker Kraft, so I'm never going to play 2 tight ends. So let's go with Brian Thomas Jr. here. Him and Christian Kirk are about the same price, and let's kind of see what that leaves us around 6,800. I mean, a couple different ways that we can go here.
Oh yeah, let me scroll up. Oh, whoops, got the Jacksonville selected.
I think I really want to potentially try to get a piece from that Baltimore Cincinnati game. I think that's a good spot to go. I'd love to be able to get Derrick Henry, but I don't think that we don't have the salary for that.
Right. I mean, what's your thoughts on Derrick Henry? You know, after the 2 games that he's had recently, and you know what his ceiling can be. I mean, he is a scary fade to me just because it's another good matchup for him. But obviously we don't have the salary for him here. Obviously, the thing is with Derrick Henry, though, I was thinking about this earlier, and me and you were talking a little bit. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I mean, I do think his ceiling is a little bit higher than Kyren Williams because, yeah, I don't know if it is. We've seen Henry when he was with the Titans get like 40 plus, close to 50 fantasy points, just because he can go over 200 yards rushing and have 3 touchdowns. But the only thing with Henry is he's been scoring a lot of touchdowns. So could touchdown regression come? And then he also has, the Lamar Jackson factor of him taking a touchdown in. But I'm just curious how owned Henry will be on this slate. That's my thoughts on Derrick Henry, though. He still does feel like a scary fade. So with the salary, is there ways we could pivot? But I'll put it to you.
Yeah, I mean, he's a scary fade just because he's coming off back-to-back games with like 25 touches, and they've been, wins for the Ravens. So generally, I feel like Baltimore, and that's the easiest mode of attack against Cincinnati. Cincy, I think, has allowed 3 games with over 110 yards to like the primary running back. Ramondre Stevenson, Isaiah Pacheco, Chuba Hubbard,
right.
all went for over 110 yards. So this feels like a spot where it is a scary fade of Derrick Henry. And I feel like if we wanted to get to Derrick Henry, the obvious pivot to not really change what we're doing on this roster would be to just move off of Jayden Reed to either, Dobbs or Wicks. And that 1,000 in savings gets us up to him, right? Would that do it? How much is he?
Yeah. So if I went from Reed down to, we'd say, Wicks.
Let's say Wicks or Dobbs. Either
Wicks
of them.
Is 5. Yeah, that gives us 83. Or if we wanted to go Dobbs,
he's 54, so you'd have 79. You'd be able to get there too.
Okay, so basically, that's really a 2v2 pivot right there. If you wanted to fit in, and I mean, Derrick Henry, I forget what the highest range of his salary was, but it definitely was higher than 78. He still is a yardage toucher, but again, that's a 2v2 pivot. So, but what direction do you want to go ultimately with this one?
I'm kind of a sucker for Jayden Reed, so let's put him back in.
I do like me some Reed. Reed.
And I think that, the field is kind of moving to more and more willing to embrace playing 2 or 3 running backs, playing a running back in the flex. But I feel like what the field isn't doing very often is playing 2 pay up running backs. And so we've got Kyren here at 76. I also like Kenneth Walker here at home against the Giants. And so I like that as an option as well. And I think that, let's go with that. And I think that, earlier in the show, we were kind of alluding to, like, if I was going to reserve like the $3.20 max, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll say, I kind of like the core of this build, but like, if we're going to kind of mix and match a couple of things, what would I do? Well, I'd probably run this lineup and then like 19 others very similar to this, just kind of making 2v2 or 3v3 type swaps, but kind of keeping the core of this in play. So, maybe on one of them, I'd go down from Reed to Dobbs and then get up to Henry. On some of these, maybe on this one, I would, if I would go 2v2, maybe I would just go down from Reed to Dobbs and then spend some of that extra money to go up to the Seattle D to kind of still have that correlation with Kenneth Walker to kind of say, okay, Seattle crushes the Giants. They get a defensive score, and then they're just letting Kenneth Walker touch the ball 20, 25 times in a blowout. That's kind of how I like to approach it.
Absolutely love it. Yeah. And Kenneth Walker, I like the play. He looked good on Monday night, looked certainly healthy, and he just has that explosive element to him as well. And I mean, for what he put up on Monday night, still feels pretty affordable at 6,800. So, love this build, man. Obviously love the Love the Packers Rams build. That's a game at 48.5 right now. And I think there's plenty of scenarios where that could be a game in the 60s, or more. Just certainly with the way the defenses are playing too. So any other thoughts before we close this one out?
About this roster, I like it. A lot of good correlation. I think, as the field shrinks, when your contest is 2,000, I think for this one was like 2,300. Correlation is even more important. I like to be super correlated on smaller field contests, just because you don't have to have the nuts. You know what I mean?
That's right.
On a 2,200 person field, like 190 points probably wins this contest. You don't have to have the 230 roster of the Millie Maker type deal. And then my final kind of teaser, unrelated to this, but we were talking about the roster review show. Every week I review a roster of my own. Generally, it's my $50 or $100 single entry, and I also do a contributors roster as well. This week I will be reviewing JM's highest dollar roster. So gotta make sure I'm on my P's and Q's. I got to give him some good feedback.
Oh man, I love that. That'll be exciting. All right, so make sure to check out that lineup review show from you next week. So it'll be reviewing week 5. As always, Stat, good stuff, man. Thanks for joining us on the DFS Lab. Make sure to join us on Friday. Myself and Pat P will be breaking it down for the final DFS Lab of the week. But Stat, again, man, thanks for the time and thanks for the building.
Of course. Hope to see you and your OWS avatar at the top of the leaderboard here in week 5.
That's right. We'll see you guys.